Today in the EU, why the EU is divided over the Mercosur trade deal.
This is a good day for Mercosur, a good day for Europe, and a landmark moment for our shared future.
The EU and 4 Mercosur countries, Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay, finalized a historic trade agreement on Friday after 25 years of talks. First proposed in 1999, the deal will establish one of the world's largest free trade zones, but not everyone seems to be happy about it. The deal has drawn sharp criticism in the Union over environmental and political concerns. So, what does the South American Trade Pact entail? And why has it created such deep divisions within the EU? Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Giada Santana, and this is Today in the EU. To shed light on the details of the EU-Mercosur deal, controversies included, I'm joined in the studio by Sofia Sanchez Manzanaro, agrifood reporter at Euractiv. Hello, Sofia.
Hello, Giada.
So this South American trade deal has been about 25 years in the making. It's the first free trade agreement between the EU and 4 countries, Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay. Broadly, what are the terms of the agreement?
So basically, this trade agreement will be the largest the EU has ever signed. And it wants to increase bilateral trade and investments with these 4 countries, 2 of them very large in population, a huge developing economy like Brazil. So they want to lower tariff and non-tariff trade barriers, and they also want to favor small and medium-sized enterprises in Europe entering these markets. I mean, the Commission has definitely selling it as a win-win for both the EU and Mercosur, but some sectors in Europe don't think that.
Yeah, precisely. Von der Leyen announced on Friday that thanks to this deal, around 4 billion euros will be saved in export duties. And she also mentioned the fact that there's more than 60,000 EU companies exporting to Mercosur countries that will be benefiting from that. So why is a trade deal that removes barriers to exports so divisive?
This trade deal has become very, very political, and there's an environmental side to it, of course, from left-wing parties, some of them, and green parties in particularly, that are in general against free trade agreements because this will boost polluting industries. In particular, in the case of agriculture, it will lead to producing in mass more goods and commodities so they can be exported. And this can damage nature resources, deplete them basically in some countries, like it has been Brazil.
Yeah, especially environmental concerns are around the fact that we could end up importing products that are linked to deforestation or other unsustainable practices. So could the deal clash with the Paris Agreement?
To put us into context, a political agreement was already reached. This is the second time the EU and Mercosur reached a political agreement on the trade deal. This happened in 2019 in the Juncker Commission, towards the end, basically. The thing is, the world has really changed in these months, and there is a need. This is a deal, as you said, 25 years in the making. This is a deal from a different era, and there was a need to reinforce that sustainability guarantees, including the objectives of the Paris Agreement, to embed them into the deal. So these years, the past pretty much 5 years, the Commission has tried to create this sustainability instrument, in addition to the trade deal that was already negotiated, that will reinforce those standards. And as we just heard from the European Commission, this will make this new sustainability instrument, the Paris Agreement, a central, essential element of the deal, which means that if a country walks out of the agreement or just doesn't comply with its objectives, they could suspend partially or entirely the trade agreement.
As a last resort, then?
Yes, I assume it will be, it could be quite dramatic to do that, but it is definitely a guarantee that didn't exist in 2019.
And however, concerns expand beyond the environment, including prices and food quality across the supply chain. French farmers have been particularly upset by this. Our producers, Charles Cohen, went to hear their grievances.
On Sunday, I spoke with Patrick Bénézy, the vice president of the FNSEA, one of France's biggest farmers' union.
Non, c'est pas digne d'une présidente de la Commission, ce déplacement qui piège des États membres qui jusqu'ici...
No, this trip is not worthy of a president of the European Commission that is trapping member states, that still have their veto power, though. All the rules that they're imposing on us do not exist there. So when von der Leyen says with her new friends that the rules are the same, it's an insult to French and European farmers. And by the way, all farmers in Europe are opposed to this deal. We're asking heads of states to tell the Commission that it's not a good idea, that they can still veto this deal, so let's just move on.
So yeah, indeed, it is just a very sensitive issue for farmers across Europe because they've seen how the European Union has signed many trade agreements and how the agricultural side is not the winner in many of them. So this is a concern for countries like France and Poland mainly, but also for many other farmers across Europe, for sure. Particularly the poultry imports are concerning. France and Poland are the largest producers of poultry in Europe, and they fear that cheaper imports will flood the market, and also beef. In this case, it's not even the cheaper imports, it's also these premium cuts that Argentina is so well known for across the world, for instance, that could compete with the premium cuts that we have here in Europe. So definitely farmers are not happy with it.
I mean, do you think these fears are justified?
I do think they are partly justified. The farmers are struggling in many parts of Europe, and also cattle farming, for instance, extensive cattle. So it means they are, outdoors most of the time, etc. It is very important for rural areas. It also keeps and ties people to rural areas that are nearly empty in many countries. So I understand there is a fear because in many ways this is a struggling industry. Again, it is a small percentage, as many will say. The amount of meat that could come at a lower quota will, in the case of beef, equals 2 burger patties, I think. We made the calculations this morning. So it doesn't seem like a lot, but it's true. The sector argues, okay, this is one trade agreement, but then we have several other trade agreements already signed and others in the pipeline. So that's their fear. It's just one burger after the other. But then there are other food sectors, agri-food sectors that could benefit from it, like dairy basically is an untapped market for the EU, and the cheese imports could increase because there are really hefty tariffs right now to export dairy products. I think it's 27% for cheese. This will be significantly lower or completely scrapped. Also spirits, wine, chocolate, so high-end products that could really find a market in South America.
So a lot of untapped potential, let's say.
Yes, for a part of the industry, yes. And I think we should also say industry, because even if cheese can be exported to Latin America, to the Mercosur, it doesn't convince livestock farmers, because in countries like France, for instance, like livestock production of meat and milk and cheese is very connected. So they don't see the benefit. It's more the industry, the food processing industry, and then the exporters who see the big benefits of this kind of agreements, at least in the agri-food sector.
So is it fair to say that the EU-Mercosur deal has also not only split the support of European countries, but also split supply chain producers?
Yes, definitely. In the case of agri-food, it is a split supply chain. We can say that farmers are the losing side, and other parts of the food and drink industry will benefit from it. When I was at the European Parliament this week, listening to debates about the Mercosur deal, even the political groups were really struggling to keep the same line, because in the same group, let's say the Liberals, Renew Europe, there were members of the European Parliament who were really against the trade deal and others that weren't, because of their nationality, I think, mainly. I mean, Irish farmers are very concerned about this. They are big producers of beef, and then Irish MEPs will oppose to it. French MEPs, honestly, it doesn't even matter which group ideology they have. They're all opposed to it, from pretty much from far right to far left. So yes, this is a matter of nationality and then of which part of the food chain you're looking at.
And taking a step back, these worries also have to do with the fact that simply times have changed. As the president of Uruguay, Lacalle, said on Friday, every leader is a child of their time, and so this deal is, in a way. The agreement was first conceived in the 90s, more than 30 years ago. So can you walk us through the metamorphosis of the deal up to today?
So I think it became as a classic trade agreement, trade for the sake of trade. It was a different European Union, more liberal, and that really believed in creating ties with the world through liberalization and free trade agreements. That's what happened in the first year, in the 90s, in the early 2000s. But then things have changed, and in many sectors, we've started to see some protectionist tendencies, particularly in the sector that I know very well, that is the agricultural one and food, where people realized they're not producing to the same standards, and then the society has become more demanding when it comes to standards and when it comes to what they're eating, the pesticides that are being used, and the conditions in which animals are kept. So these demands from society have been partially reflected in legislation, even if our legislation doesn't go as far as many groups, political groups, would like it to. So I think that's why this update needed to happen, because there was no way such an old 90s trade deal baby could go through in 2024.
And I wonder if this affected in any way the European Commission's communication to the press of the signature of this agreement and how secretive it all was. You've been closely following what's been happening.
It has been, yes, as you say, very secretive. We have been asking non-stop the Commission to tell us more about whether von der Leyen, if she's traveling or not to Montevideo, because if a European Commission president is taking a 20-hour trip to South America, it means something will happen. So it was really important to know about this trip. They kept it secret pretty much until yesterday. When she landed, it was the moment we were told, so the press and the public. And it's quite shocking. Also, members of the European Parliament were really in the dark completely. I talked to many of them, and they were also seeking information on me. So it's really shocking to see that even an institution of the European Union didn't have access to this crucial information during the endgame negotiations.
And so now we've seen, finally, a political agreement has been signed. It's not the end of it. We will keep hearing about Mercosur for quite a while. So what's next?
Wow. Yeah, this is what I'm wondering. Now is the legal scrubbing part. So basically, there need to be legal tweaks. And then a key thing needs to happen. The European Commission needs to decide whether they are splitting the trade deal into two parts or they are keeping it as an entire partnership. Splitting it will mean the trade part is individual, and it goes through the Council and the European Parliament. It needs approval of the Council and the European Parliament, but it doesn't need approval of all the parliaments in the European Union. This means it could enter into force sooner. And as we have seen, for instance, with the CETA agreement with Canada, it entered into force provisionally, but the French Parliament is still opposing to it. But because it is provisionally into force, the trade part is already taking effect. So the issue is that we don't even know their support in the Council and in the Parliament. And this is the shortcut. There is no another shortcut. There are member states, we already know, France and Poland, they're opposed to it. There are member states like Belgium who will abstain because they have different positions within the country. There's Austria, who I think also needs to abstain because of a parliament decision. The Netherlands, they have a conservative coalition now in government with, I think, at least 3 parties in the coalition oppose the agreement or are reticent to support it. One of the parties is the Farmers' Party, the BPP. And then Italy. I think we are all looking at Italy as the kingmaker of this agreement because Italy has an enormous industry that could benefit from the EU-Mercosur trade agreement, but also the agricultural part is quite strong. And I think Meloni will have a difficult decision to make. In the European Parliament, it's the same. Sometimes the groups will be split, and there is a very large conservative, nationalistic, protectionist part of the parliament in this term. So let's see if there is support, and the votes will be very tight, that's for sure.
And apparently the trade agreement includes 1 billion euros to compensate farmers affected. Do you think this could increase the amount of support in council and parliament?
Already the Juncker Commission, they promised 1 billion euros for farmers. Should there be any distortion in the market that affects them? But in this last press conference, the Commission has been very reticent, and I actually asked a question about this compensation, this 1 billion for farmers. They were very reticent to even mention it, and it took several minutes within their answer to bring it up. So for them, it's really a last resort because there are some safeguards that can be triggered. If agricultural imports are distorting the market, there are certain safeguards that can just, I think, halt partially or totally the flow of imports. Also, when I spoke to the agricultural sector, they were not really happy about this 1 billion because they see it is not a solution for a structural problem. This is just money that will be given if there is an issue. But if this issue becomes persistent and structural, there is no money that can fix it. So I don't think it will really convince many.
Thank you, Sofia.
Thank you, Giada.
This was Euractiv's podcast, Today in the EU. Sound design by Miriam Sáenz de Tejada and Niels de Keokelare. Research and production by Charles Cohen. Visit Euractiv to stay on top of the latest news and sign up for our newsletters. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and your favorite streaming platforms. Don't forget to subscribe and give us a review. It will really help us spread the word about our work. See you tomorrow. As part of our commitment to accuracy, inclusion, and transparency, Euractiv is part of the Trust Project.